Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Okay, now let's try that again.
Nah, just roll with it. We're having
just
fun.
roll with it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Record Live. It's great to have you here. As you can see, this is a pre-recorded video, so we're not going live today because in the US, where our special guest is, it would be 1 a.m., so we don't want to do that to him. But everyone, would you please welcome Matthew Lucio from the Adventist History Podcast. Round of applause.
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome,
Thank you.
Matthew.
I hear the cheering. I have
Welcome.
pre-recorded cheering in my headphones, so
Perfect.
Oh,
they're going crazy right now.
Yeah, it's really, really great to have you here, Matthew. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of our humble production. Just before we begin, I just want to get to know you a little bit. I know you're a pastor in Illinois. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
And you've got a wife, Laura, and two beautiful daughters, Aerith and Arwen. Is that correct?
Yes.
It
you
is?
got it. Well done.
Thank you.
Man, not everybody knows how to get Era's name right. They're like, you have two daughters, Arwen and Spaghetti. I don't know how to pronounce that other one.
I relate to that. My name is Mary Ellen, and I often get Marilyn or Marilyn, like just kind of falls apart in their mouth. But
Like Marilyn.
We just
I
say
used to
melon.
live. Melon.
we just
Anyway, we digress. But yeah, Matthew, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry and what your average day looks like, and some facts about you.
My average COVID day. I cry until 10 a.m. No. Let me back up. So I was born in Ohio, or when I was in Africa one time, they pronounce it Ohio, which I actually like better. And I think Ohio
That's
should
cool.
change the pronunciation. It's like, from the great state of Ohio. And I'm like, I don't know where that is, but that sounds like an awesome place to be from. So anyway, so from Ohio. So I'm a Midwesterner here in America. And I've moved around the Midwest. Now I'm in Illinois. And been here maybe 2.5 years or so, and started podcasting about what is it now, six plus years.
Wow.
In fact, this very day it's been 6 years. So on the 22nd of October is when I started. I thought that was a great day for an Adventist to start podcasting. Get the disappointment over with early, and then it can only be uphill from there or downhill. So yeah, but now, but I pastor is my day job, I guess, and night job. And podcasting is just my side hustle, I guess. And I love it. It's my passion. I love it.
Awesome. Well, I got to say, you're a little bit of a celebrity down under. I talk to a lot of Adventists that listen to your podcast and love it. And Jared, you're actually a bit of a fanboy yourself.
look, yeah, pretty much. I have to admit, I went back to episode 1.
Yeah,
and
sorry.
I've listened to all of them, pretty much all of them. So I really enjoy it. You had me at the first Star Wars reference. If anyone can put Star Wars and Ellen White together, I just don't know how that happened, but I was hooked.
Actually, you guys put Star Wars and Ellen White together with Keepers of the Flame. I remember when I saw that they were doing Revelation 12, and I remember seeing that Darth Vader mask in lightsaber, going through the desert chasing the woman, and I'm like, what is this, and how was nobody sued in doing this? This is awesome.
Under the radar, down under, that's what it means. We're under the radar. So
that's right.
I feel like so few people, it's such a niche thing, Keepers of the Flame, that no one's going to sue them. It's like they can do anything.
Yep, that's true. But anyways, look, I'm flattered that you have my picture in your bedroom. But to me, it's got to be. I did this for me. Like, I'm not like I'm this brilliant guy who wants to teach the world. I had to do this for my own sanity, which is where I think the best kinds of creativity come from. I think when you're really trying to like sell it to people, it's not going to be as authentic. So it's like, you got to do this for you first and foremost. And so I had like 14 downloads my first episode, and I didn't care because I'm glad 14 people listened to it. Probably 3 of those were my mom. But it was really just, I had to do this. I needed a deadline every month to study this stuff, or else I'd never do it. And I didn't want to just like read a textbook. It had to be something that I would enjoy if somebody else had done it. Now, I went back and listened to my 3rd episode today, and I can't do it. I just like the audio quality and I'm just like, come on, dude, get better at this.
Can I unpack a little bit about why, Matthew? Like you mentioned for your own sanity and you wanted to research some of the stuff. And one thing that I appreciate about it is the sort of stuff we learned in Pathfinders. It is the Adventist history. You know, we have vague recollections of what happened in 1844 and all this stuff, but you've gone in with a fair amount of depth and sort of research. Like, you only release one podcast a month on the 22nd usually. So I think another one will drop tomorrow in the States or today.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually not quite done with it. So I'm going to hustle to get that thing done by
after we've finished here. Great.
Yep.
So I guess, going back, what was the reason? Were you doing a series that you felt, I don't know this stuff, I need to get into it as a pastor more? Were people having questions, or what was the sort of motivation why you decided to research and then thought, hey, I can share some of this in some sense?
Yeah, good question. And it started out, like many other professions, when I started out pastoring, I felt woefully under-equipped for it. Because you learn all these things in the classroom. You learn theology, and then you get in the church and you realize nobody cares. You know what I mean? Like you're looking to have this great theological discussion with people, and nobody else cares. And so it's like you have to switch gears. And I remember one time in my first district, an elder came up to me and said, "We need to meet on Friday and rehearse how we're going to do communion." I was like, okay. I mean, it's like, just go with the flow. We can talk about it on Sabbath morning and do it. He's like, no, we need to rehearse it. We need to do it exactly like they taught you in seminary. And I'm like, I don't know how they taught me in seminary. Like, just read the manual. You can do it a little differently. It doesn't really matter. And he's like, no, there's this one true way to do it. So questions like that just got me thinking, is there one true way to do this? I had to go look at the manual. And then I start digging in Adventist history. Like, well, how did they do it? I like history. I didn't necessarily love Adventist history at the time. But I found myself having to keep going back. What did Ellen White really mean when she said that? What's the context of that quote? Just going back all the time. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to study this stuff. So I don't like keep getting in these conversations with people where they say something and I don't know for sure if it's right or wrong, and I have to keep telling them, hold on, let me go back and look at that. So it was like, I got to learn this stuff. And if I don't have a deadline, if I don't have something forcing my hand to learn it, I'll always keep putting it off. And so that's why I was like, well, I'll just do it as a podcast then.
Yeah, wow. Just to go off that as well, on your website, there's a quote from you in your bio, and it's very similar to what Jared asked, but it says, a lot of the questions you faced as a pastor had their roots in Adventist history. And I think that's fascinating because it kind of plays into that whole identity like discussion and things. But for you, those questions, were they more like personal faith, my walk with God questions, or were they those theological discussions? Like, can you name some of those questions that you had?
Yeah, I mean, I think the communion thing is one that took me back. But, oftentimes it'd be some quote that Ellen White said, and and a member watched some sermon by somebody else, and the person dropped the quote, and they're like, is this really what she meant? They wanted clarification. Or maybe it was like Ellen White said something like when she wrote her son and said, God doesn't love disobedient children. And it's like, well, that seems really harsh. So you look back at it, and she realized it was harsh too. And but you have to go back and constantly be looking at these things, because people sometimes, if you guys haven't noticed, they grab Ellen White statements and build like a whole impressive structure on them. And they're not always in context. So it's like I had to keep kind of going back, because sometimes they'd be like, well, we shouldn't eat this, we need to get this out of the church, Ellen White said no butter or whatever, it's like,
okay, so yeah, it wasn't really personal questions as much as it was answering your congregation's like it wasn't for me. But it eventually became something that was really important for me, because studying Adventist history is like studying family history. And you inevitably will find something, be like, oh, that's why we're crazy like that. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, that's why Uncle so-and-so never wanted to talk about politics, because he had blah, blah, blah in his past. Like, so you find that stuff about us. Like, and it's really enlightening. Like you just kind of get excited about it. I think you just can't help but get excited about it. It's like, what else am I going to find about why we are the way that we are? It explains so much when you find some of these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. How has that sort of changed the way that you pastor or changed your personal faith journey, just having these insights into sort of, because this is not the kind of insight that the average Adventist has. Like most of us, maybe our parents, maybe our grandparents are Adventists, so we've got that context, we've got a local church context, but to really have that overarching umbrella of like, wow, okay, so this church was started up by teenagers and then this happened and this happened, like, has that changed your faith journey?
I think it has. I really think it has, because I realize, first of all, I think it gives me more options for my faith, because, I grew up in Ohio. There's this really big theme park with roller coasters and stuff near, like, an hour away. And I grew up hearing from some church members that if I go ride those roller coasters, my guardian angel can't go with me, so I'm on my own.
Oh my goodness.
Which was like spiritual trauma. Like, I realized that later on in life.
Yeah.
But it really bothered me when I was a kid, because I'm like, man, if I die, I guess I'm lost, if I fall off a roller coaster. Why? Because they had some, idea from Ellen White, you can't go into these places or whatever. And so they told me that, and it's like that really affected me spiritually. But when I study history, when I realized, what she was getting at, when I learned some of these other things, it gives options for my faith, because before I learned this stuff, my option was I either don't go there and I'm safe, or I go there and I'm on dangerous ground. Like, those are my only two options. I had no other options that I was aware of, right? Then you read in context, you understand, more of what was going on when she said things like that, and you realize, oh, that doesn't really apply to this. And so it gives you a way out. It kind of resolves some of that tension that has built up. So I think when you study history, it gives you more options for your faith. You realize there's other authentic ways of being Adventist that I was not aware of. And I really think that can help, because sometimes, we all have these kind of fork in the road moments in our experiences where we're not really sure what to do. Maybe we feel trapped. And sometimes being aware of what happened in the past, it can be like, oh, well, when other Adventists were at this spot, they took this route and I didn't realize that was an option for me. So I can do that too and be okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. One of the things, sorry, just before you go, Joe, one of the things we sort of joke about here at Record a little bit is that, because you mentioned Ellen White and how often like people throw quotes of hers, to change people's behavior. But we're always like, if someone throws an Ellen White quote at us, if we can find another Ellen White quote that contradicts it, that's like the best form of argument. Because it's right. Sometimes, there's different opinions and you only know one side. And so, yeah. Anyway.
So you get those letters too. Okay.
Yeah.
Look, I'm interested, Matthew, in you say that. Like, it's easy for some who work for the church, and also, for church members, to criticize Adventism. There's ways to poke holes in things, and a lot of people are scared, I think, if we deeply read into Ellen White, or if we look for loopholes, then we'll lose our faith, we'll lose our identity.
Sure.
So I'd be interested to hear from you. What's one thing in studying all of this Adventist history and then looking at our heritage and our identity, what's something that makes you proud to be an Adventist? What's something that just gives you like, wow, I maybe didn't know this as well before, but this is actually something that we can really contribute to the world?
Wow, that's a great question. I think there's a few things that have, you do worry sometimes when you crack open these books, when you read these letters that they wrote to each other, like, am I going to think less of some of these people than I already do? Like, is it going to blow up the myth?
Yeah.
And that's a necessary process. But sometimes you delightfully learn that they were better than you had thought, that they had better ideas. And honestly, I think, I mean, I knew that Adventists were against slavery in the antebellum period of America before the war. But I didn't realize how forcefully they were, on what the principles were undergirding it. Joseph Bates at one point during the Mexican-American War called America land of blood and slavery, a neighbor-killing land of blood and slavery. And I realized, like, there's this tradition in Adventism to speak prophetically to the world around us that I was unaware of. Because I had grown up, here, you may not know this, you may know this about the States, is that a lot of our churches have American flags in the sanctuary.
Okay.
And this is a tradition that goes back, half a century or so, because, during the World Wars, we wanted to be seen as loyal citizens, even though we didn't want to fight in the army. And, the government kind of looked at us with suspicion. So we put the flags up. Look at us. Look at us. We love America. We're your friends. Please don't arrest us. That's an oversimplification, but you get the idea. And so, like, to me, it was always like, it was always the side of, we need to show respect to America. We need to show that we're loyal to our whatever country that it is that we're in. And I hadn't been aware of that vein in Adventist history of, we also have this proud tradition of speaking prophetically to the nation, any nation that we're in, and saying, this is wrong. We should not do this, even though we're a minority and liable for some kind of repercussion. Like, they weren't afraid of that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose that in Adventism.
I guess my follow-on question from that is, it seems as though, learning all this stuff about the history, and I think this is a very biblical concept. I think it's reiterated over and over again in the Old Testament. It's like, don't forget where you've come from, because your identity is important. Like, your family of origin and the Israelite sort of nation, all this stuff. And I just wonder, because I'm 24 and I hang out with a lot of, youth, young people. And I would say that probably 1% of people my age either care about or know about Adventist history and these things that happen. Like, they probably get that, Ellen White was young and she got hit on the head and, like, she held up a Bible and, like, all these random things. But when it comes to like an overarching narrative, no clue at all. And not even that, but like even prophecy and like our understanding of 1844 and all of this stuff. So how have you seen that maybe loss of knowledge of history impact our identity, or have we lost our identity in that process?
Yeah, I really think that's the fundamental question facing Adventism today, is just, what does it mean to be an Adventist? We've seen a fracturing of that, and it's not dissimilar to the same kind of fracturing that's happening in most Western countries, like in terms of our political identities. Like, what does it mean to be American? I don't know. Maybe you guys are wrestling with the same kind of question. What does it mean to be an American, Mary Ellen?
Yeah, it's been really on my mind lately.
But this is what, this kind of fracturing of this cohesive ethnic identity of what it meant to be an American that survived for so many centuries. And that's been, and so I think that's happening with our institutional church as well. We have a lot of different options now that we didn't have in decades past, that you could be an Adventist in good standing, right? I think we're conscious of the various ways that some people who are Adventists in good standing today would never have been allowed to be Adventists in good standing 75 years ago. So
unpack that a little bit. Do you mean sort of more progressive and like different variations of conservative?
Well, yeah, I mean, you could probably wear jewelry in most places in the Western world now and be okay in a way that you could. So, I mean, for instance, here in the 1930s, we were told by the editor of the Review that if you persist in going to a movie theater, you could be disfellowshipped. All right.
Whoa.
Movies were evil, except for those nature movies, including the early Disney ones. They were okay with those. But okay. So now you can be considered a good Adventist and go see a Pixar movie. Okay. Mm-hmm. You probably still don't want to advertise that you saw Saw 7. But even if you did, you're probably not going to be disfellowshipped.
Yeah.
By most churches. They may not look kindly on it, but you're probably not going to be disfellowshipped. So there's positive and negatives to this identity crisis. And the positive, of course, is that multiple identities are allowed to flourish. And sometimes that's a good thing, right? We need to loosen up in some areas. But it also means that we're kind of like, it's like Pangea, where we were this one mass, and then we're just kind of slowly drifting apart, which I think really happened. It started before Ellen White died, but I think we're cognizant of the ways in which Ellen White managed to hold the thing together during her life. Adventism has always been a coalition. It's been a coalition of various types of people. You obviously have the hardcore Sabbatarian Christians, but you also have the medical interests, the people like Kellogg, who, he would pay lip service to the prophetic interpretations of the church, but really he wanted to help people and make a difference in the community. That kind of, maybe social justice kind of Adventism, the kind of Adventism that criticizes slavery and speaks up, like that kind of Adventism has always been a part of it. So you have apocalyptic Adventism and you have social justice Adventism, and you have these various Adventisms that were just kind of held together. And that's really easy to do when you think Jesus is coming next year. Yeah. But over time, when it doesn't seem to be happening next year, the coalitions can kind of start splitting apart. And, we still see those same kind of Adventist tribes today. We see social justice Adventists, and it doesn't mean that they're unconcerned with other aspects of Adventism, but like that's their primary understanding of Adventism, is we are on this planet to help the planet, to help people, and that is far more important than arguing about dates and and obscure prophetic imagery and all that kind of stuff. Then you have others who say, no, this is really about kind of getting along, emphasizing our Christianness, what we have in common with other Christians, and just chilling. And if we need to go to church on Sunday, go to church on Sunday, to reach people, and they're kind of more, anyways, I could go on and on, but you get the idea. We have these tribes in Adventism. They've always existed. They were mostly held together during the life of Ellen White. And then after that, we've kind of just been slowly drifting apart. So, we're overdue. We're overdue for a nice, big general conference session talking about who we are as Adventists.
Literally overdue. I think didn't happen this year.
Yeah. Well played.
So just going back to dates, today is October 22 in Australia right now. It is, and it will be shortly in your part of the world.
Can't wait.
Which is part of the reason, I've seen on Twitter some of the Adventist Twitterites are putting out, Disappointment Day, celebrating Disappointment Day. This is it's sort of our one date. If we were to have an Adventist Day around the world, I think this would be it, because everyone around the world sort of is aware of October 22, 1844. That date is sort of branded into us, even though, interestingly enough, there were no Seventh-day Adventists existing at that time. We weren't actually Seventh-day Adventists yet. But what do you think we can learn about today, like from Disappointment Day? What's something that comes out and still helps us as Adventists, remembering such a day, which was such a big disappointment?
Yeah. I remember when I was in seminary, I wanted to create an Adventist liturgy, like complete with a liturgical year, like with various kind of feast days that we would celebrate. And of course, October 22 would be like the biggest day of the year. We wouldn't celebrate Christmas. It's pagan. But it just kind of find days to celebrate throughout the year. And I remember thinking, how would we celebrate October 22? Like, would this be a day of like weeping and remembering our sins and, kind of like a Day of Atonement thing? Or would it be a day of celebration? And then if so, what would we be celebrating? And those are all really still unanswered questions. But to me, I think one of the things that it should commemorate for us, and one of the things I love about October 22nd is that we were wrong about something. And then we went back and tried to figure it out. Like, we didn't give up. We didn't persist in our wrongness per se. Like, we're not like, well, we had to be right. Jesus came spiritually. We just didn't see him. Kind of double down on it. We were wrong. And I love the idea that the advent of our church is being wrong about something. Like, how cool is that? Like, how just kind of counter-cultural, unexpectedly subversive is that idea? Like, and that's kind of the foundation of Adventism, is that we should be humble because we've been wrong before. Like, let's not be overly certain about things. We've done that before. We were wrong. You know what I mean? Like, what if that were the kind of the beginning of like, it's just humility.
We shouldn't even be here.
Yeah,
it was a mistake. We're a mistake, and yet here we are.
And so it's like, when I'm going to talk to other Christians, like, let 1844 be the beginning of that conversation. Say, you know what? I'm not here to try to tell you like this is the way it has to be for you. It's just like, I'm coming from a place where I was wrong. I was disappointed. I was confused. That's how we started. And so we're not here to pass judgment on you if you have questions, right? Because that was the beginning of us. We had questions.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that speaks to where we are right now. I think it's never been more relevant.
and it's so in some ways the opposite of how we've perhaps practiced from, maybe 50, 60 years ago, or, it seems to be the opposite of the way, because we have the truth that we need to give to everyone, and we've pushed that line.
Yeah.
How do you see those two tensions, two things in tension?
Well, I mean, I think you would just keep going another day and say, well, eventually we learned what we think is the truth, and there's no reason to not be, I guess, confident about that. There's a difference between confidence and just insufferably obstinate, or just with lacking empathy for other people.
Right.
Like, we can't get a superiority complex. We can be confident in what we believe, but it's like, I'm confident in it, but I'm always open to further correction from the Lord if we're wrong on some point. You know what I mean? And it's like, what other church would have that? Like, if that was our approach, what other church does that? It's like, we think we're right, but we could be wrong, and we're open to however God may tell us that we're wrong. It's cool.
I think that's such an interesting point you make, Matthew, because, like, I think when you understand this history, it informs your behavior, right? And so you obviously are non-judgmental, you're humble in that way, because, like, we are a mistake, I'm still here. But I think for the majority of Adventists, I don't know if it really works that way. I think for a lot of congregations, it's Ellen White, or it's nothing, she must be right. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I think, when you look at society today, I think a lot of people reject Ellen White, and, like, that's quite a statement to make. Maybe a lot of people,
wow.
But some Adventists are starting to reject, or just, like, not focus on Ellen White, because it is very sort of prescriptive, and it is very, this way is the right way to live, and all that kind of stuff. But society seems to be moving to more of that. Well, if you're like this, that's fine, and if I'm like this, that's fine. Non-judgmental. What would you have to say about that? Like, do you think she is still relevant, or is that okay to just be like, oh, well, I'm not going to live by her anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's still really interesting. I think she's still relevant. It's hard to read Ellen White sometimes, because she did write in that very matter-of-fact way. And I think that can be very difficult for people to stomach today. But you got to keep in mind, like, she wrote in the time that she lived. And you can't hold her down for that. You just kind of have to keep that in mind as you read her, that, when she makes these broad sweeping statements that seems to, like, take every other Christian and throw them under the rug, without exception. It's just like, it's take her rhetorical point, and I would say study her out in these other issues. I think what concerns me is that while Ellen White is kind of being pushed aside, there's never been a time where we've understood her so little.
Okay.
And I can't help but think there's a connection between that. She still has a lot of really interesting, amazing things to say. And I think she's being set aside in part, like, the idea of Ellen White, the idea of this plump American 19th century woman telling us the best, course forward spiritually is just kind of silly. This prophet is just kind of silly. I know. I think she's being dismissed without being understood. And that's kind of what worries me in studying Adventist history. You can feel free to disagree with something she said. That's your right. Anyone's right. But at least understand her.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I think maybe the reason people don't even attempt to is because of the culture in which she's sort of represented, and the I don't want to say the people, but I guess it is the type of people that really sort of throw her quotes around, as you were saying.
Yeah. But I mean, if that's kind of the way we want to play it, then why would anyone be a Christian?
Yeah. Yeah, good point.
It's almost a sign of the times, though, isn't it? That society is reading shallower into a lot of things. Like you get these conspiracy theories flying around, and something that's frustrating to me, it's like someone says, have you done your research? Because they've watched 3 or 4 YouTube videos. My response to that is usually, like, read a book, like, get,
with
someone who's put some effort in and dive deeply. And in some ways, as Christians, we're in danger of not engaging with the Bible in the same way that you've mentioned. There's a danger there for Ellen White. We're not sort of understanding it deeply enough. We're rejecting certain things that we don't like, but without really understanding or engaging with those ideas. it seems to be a societal problem, not just our church.
Yeah, and I don't think we've ever lived, and I'm just talking about Western society collectively, I don't think we've ever lived in a time that was more judgmental in a sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean this in a very compassionate way. I don't mean this to just kind of slam anyone who's living today. Because, yes, people had their convictions in the 1800s and 1900s, but people still have those same convictions. I mean, people get canceled. Sometimes they deserve it, and sometimes I don't know. But I'm just saying, it's like we're just really quick. If you do certain things, you're done. You're just done. There's no grace. There's no path to reconciliation. You're just done. And I don't want to get into the weeds of specific examples, but I'm just saying it's like that's super judgmental. That's super judgmental and has nothing to do with the church. So
it almost seems like the rhetoric was stronger back then, but the relationships were better. I remember a story you told on your podcast about Joseph Bates sort of not leaving someone's house until he'd convinced them. He spent 8 hours at someone's house, but they had a robust discussion. And the thing was, they were coming with very different views and agendas, but they were able to still be civil and talk about it, rather than going, I disagree with you, you're cancelled, sort of as you reflected. It seems like, yes, some of the language might have been stronger against other groups of people or ideas and ideologies, but at the same time, these people coexisted quite. They seemed to a bit closer, or a bit more able to engage each other's ideas without sort of we have a saying, sort of play the ball, not the man, sort of thing. They had a different target than sort of the person and their personhood.
Sure. I mean, I think this is just a human thing. I think we tend to be presentist in the sense that we prefer our present to the past, maybe even to the future. Like, we think we're the most privileged generation, and we've learned so much more that those ignorant people in history don't. And I think we gotta, that attitude has been present in every generation. So you'll find statements like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, like, look at us, we live in the greatest time we've ever. And we look back, we're like, oh, you didn't have toothpaste. And someone 100 years from now is gonna be looking back on us and be like, look at those savages with chemotherapy to treat cancer. Those barbaric people. So I think when you study history, it helps get rid of that. I hope it helps get rid of that hubris of the present.
Yeah.
Like, humans are humans. Humans are judgmental. Sure, maybe religion can help shape some of that judgmentalism and direct it. But even without religion, humans are judgmental. And there's nothing wrong with taking a decided, I think, stand on a particular issue that you feel strongly about, whether it be climate change or anything else. That's perfectly fine. I think the issue is how you treat your enemies. And when religion works well, it reminds us to love our enemies and to treat them well. And I wish Western society at the present would not forget that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in Washington and America. Okay.
Oh my God. Had to mute the microphones, which I think is very telling. It's actually a point I was just going to raise. I think sort of, I heard this differentiation between discussion and dialogue, and how discussion is sort of just people talking at each other, trying to get their point across, trying to convert someone to their belief system and whatever. Whereas dialogue is sort of actually listening. And I think we've sort of lost the ability to listen, because Joseph Bates was probably talking to someone who wasn't constantly distracted by technology, who had time on his hands to listen, who was open to new ideas. But I think these days, not only are non-Christians not able to listen, I think Adventists also don't want to listen, because there's so many things that threaten our religion and our way of thinking. And I think a lot of it stems from fear as well. It's like, oh, you better not go there, better not do this, better not hear that, or you might lose your faith. And so anyway, just wanted to that. But
no, I agree with it. I mean, I feel sad that I don't have the privilege to have been an Adventist when Adventism was winning.
Okay.
Because I mean, when we were just like sending missionaries, and you just like send one person to an entire country that had never been reached before, and like a few years later they've got 20 people, and then 40, and then you know what I mean? It's just like you almost didn't have to do anything. You know?
Yeah.
And like there's this feeling of optimism, like we are going to finish this thing. And you know, I mean, look, since the Second World War, we've, you know, especially since the 1960s, we've been well, really since the early 1900s, there was this element of like getting knocked back on our heels with liberalism and fundamentalism, and we've been playing defense for like 100 years. And you know, like we constantly feel under attack, and I, you know, I think we got to have empathy with these Adventists who can be snarky and mean, because I think a lot of them are coming from a perspective of they feel like the thing that gives them meaning and significance in their life is just constantly under threat.
Yeah.
And they're scared and they're afraid, and they lash out in anger. But I think a lot of times you just have to look past the anger and be like, that's not really who you are. That's just how you feel like you need to protect yourself. And I'm not going to take it personally. You do what you got to do. You know, I wish you wouldn't act that way. But I want to understand, you know, I can't imagine what it would be like when you grew up with a certain flavor of Adventism, and now it just seems to be undermined, and you see all these young people laughing about how Adventism used to be. You know what I mean? Like, and you can feel angry about that. Doesn't mean you're right.
Yep.
But you know, but I think we have to choose empathy. And in this age where everyone is just like throwing their 2 cents out on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, how cool is it if we could be a people, first of all, who, like you said, we learn to listen to other people, but also we have that empathy for other people, and we take the time to persuade people, like meaningfully one-on-one in human interaction, to persuade people of something we think is valuable. They may not agree with us, but I feel like people have given up on really trying to persuade other people now. We just kind of just blast them, or we shame them, or we ridicule them on late night TV, or, you know what I mean? Like we just make fun of them. Like we're not trying to persuade each other anymore. Like advertisements are really not about, you know, directly trying to say, well, here's the merits of brand A, here's brand B. No, it's like, well, if we can be funny or play a catchy song or whatever, then we'll be memorable. We'll just kind of get that bug in your brain and you'll go buy our brand. It's like, we're not really trying to persuade you. We're trying to trick you. We're trying to be omnipresent so that you know, we're always in the back of your mind. And it's like, I think that's something that we have to offer going forward. Yeah. It's like, I just want to invite you to lunch. Let's sit down and let's just talk about something deep and meaningful. And I want to persuade you. You may not agree in the end, but this is how much I care. I'm not just sending ads at you.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So
I really like that. Sorry, Mary Ellen. I was just saying, I really like that idea, because we like to get practical, I guess, on this show, and you've sort of given us some practical ideas on, hey, how do we even talk to other people? It seems strange that we need to explore that, but it's like, hey, have empathy, listen, sit down with someone, have conversations, and have meal together. You know, just be in the presence of other people and willing to discuss and to dialogue, as we said. So I really, that resonates a lot.
Good. I mean, we can't do that as Adventists unless we're okay. Like we're not insecure about our own faith. Like you have to kind of know what you believe and not feel like if somebody believes something else, you failed, or you know, they might change you. You know, if they say what they believe, they might. You know, it's like you got to just human to human, man. Just go underneath the social media, underneath the political rhetoric on TV and stuff, and just, you know, be human.
Absolutely. I was just going to ask as well, like with your podcast, for those who haven't listened to it or have only listened to a few episodes, how do you get that across? Like, how do you make history practically relevant? Because I know like I've never been a huge fan of history myself, because often it's just like facts and it's kind of dry and it's kind of so how do you personalize that and make it relevant?
Te absolvo. Let me begin with that. I think you gotta add personality to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's got to be like, it's not just, this is the history. There is no the history. Whenever any of us do history, it's our story that we're telling, you know, and somebody else may add tell it differently. The facts are the facts, I guess, but we're all going to see them differently. So it's like, this is Matthew's story of Adventist history. And so it's going to have my personality in it. I try to keep it fair, and I'm not like twisting things to suit my agenda or anything like that, but it's me. Like, you're getting some of me with it. And I'm not going to pretend that, I'm some robot just telling you the facts. You know what I mean? Like, so I think, anyways, most of the reviews that I get, like when people write me and stuff, it's always like, I thought this would suck. You have to beep that out. But it didn't. It surprised me by not sucking. And I'm like, well, I'll take it. Like, that's great. And maybe some people, it's not their cup of tea. They don't want the Star Wars references. I got one review I remember on iTunes. They're like, you need to be more reverent about Adventist history. Fine. Then go watch Keepers of the Flame, sir. And that's fine. You can go learn it that way. I have no problem with that. But this is the way we're going to do history on this podcast. And what I love about it is, like, towards the persuasion point, is that podcasting, at least audio podcasting, is just really intimate. Somebody could be out for a walk, a run, driving to work, whatever, and it's just you and them. Like, you're in their ears, especially if they have like AirPods or whatever. You're in their head, and it's just you two. And that's about as close as I can get, I think, to sitting across the table from somebody.
Yeah, for sure.
TV is distracting because they're like, that dude's ugly. Why is he wearing that shirt? That doesn't match. What room is he in? Can I see the books on his bookshelf? What has he got over there? Anything by Desmond Ford? Can I, you know what I mean? Like, it's distracting. So that's why I love podcasting. It's intimate.
Yeah. Oh, I love podcasts. I'm obsessed with them. I think, it's just such an effective form of communication, and it may not be, dialogue, but it's, as you say, it's very personal. And I think it's great that you're an Adventist in that space, because there's not a lot of us in that space. There's probably like 10 to 20 podcasts out there that I know of, if that, like, in the world. Yep. So it's,
But more and more are coming all the time. It's great.
Yeah. Matthew, you mentioned not being on TV, but I do know that you've been doing some work. I wanted to ask you about some of the YouTube stuff that you've been expanding into sort of lately. Can you tell us a little bit? I saw something Project Atlas, and you've done some Sabbath school videos and some videos for your church members, but you've shared them more broadly, I guess, on the YouTube platform. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the differences? Like, why you're not doing some of that in a podcast space, but what YouTube is bringing to your ministry, and what the point of some of these new medias that you're exploring is.
Yeah, no, good question. I'm not a camera person. I'm not a YouTube person. I feel like I'm not in the age bracket to be really great at that. I didn't grow up with it, really. So I did it because I wanted to see what would it look like if we created something like a digital church. So really, that's our church's channel, right? Not my personal channel. And so that's why I'm not as Matthew on that channel, but because I feel like I represent church. So the goal is, it makes more sense during COVID maybe than it did before COVID, but what would it look like if our local congregation, if we supplied the members who got on camera and did their thing, whether it's teaching Sabbath school or doing something else, and then people could get to know those members before they even came and visited the church. Now, granted, it's YouTube, so anyone in the world could be watching it, but fine. Maybe they'll watch our church and be like, hey, those Adventists aren't as crazy as I thought they were. I'll go visit my local church and see.
Yeah.
And so it becomes like a space where you have your physical congregation that's local, and then you have your digital congregation. And that's the idea behind it, and also that it could be a spot that we could equip churches, and hence Sabbath school things and all that, that other churches could watch, and we could provide resources for them, because hey, you don't have to be a multi-million-dollar ministry anymore to provide resources for churches at a good quality.
Well, that's great that you're in that digital space. I think it's more important than ever to be doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, good on you. Well, I don't know if have you got more questions, Jared?
Well, I think we're running low on time. We don't want to keep you all night, Matthew, because we really want that October 22 podcast to come out tomorrow.
Yeah, it's just gonna end. It's gonna end abruptly.
Can you give us a sneak peek on what the topic is?
Good point. I would say so we've been talking lately about the 1930s, and we're kind of in the beginning of World War II and what that looks like. So this episode, this is a world exclusive. This episode is primarily about Judson Washburn starting a fight with W.W. Prescott. Prescott had just retired. He preached a sermon on the Trinity, which really ticked Washburn off because, those early Adventists were not Trinitarians in the 18. And so he wrote this 20-plus page screed, just taking down Prescott for this sermon. And so we're going to talk about that. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about American leadership and their pleasant self-deception about Adventists in the military. Because they would write things in the 1930s like, well, we believe in non-combatancy, and I know some of you Adventists are thinking about the German Adventists in World War I, but you know what? They didn't know that we were non-combatants, and so after the war, we sat down with them, we talked with them, and they realized, oh, we Adventists are non-combatants. And like as this book is being published, German Adventists, in the 1930s, are colluding with the Nazi regime. While the American leadership is like assuring the world that it's like, no, we're non-combatants. The Germans understand this. And it's like,
no, they don't. It seems like a really fascinating time in history. I listened to the last one that you did about genetics, eugenics, and that really sort of opened my eyes, but it sort of made sense. I was like, some of the racial tensions in the church at the moment, even cross-cultural marriages. My wife is not white, and I had to study for myself. Some like you said at the beginning of the episode, to go, what did Ellen White really say? Like, if I get into this relationship, is this bad? Is this going to be a problem or not accepted in the church? And it was a fascinating sort of episode, the previous one. So I'm looking forward to some of the wartime stuff. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think it will. I we could do this all day. But the eugenics one, I agree with you. That one was really, I think Adventism then and now, in all, Western societies as a whole, there was a beheading in France not too long ago. They're dealing with these kind of tensions because we know, in America at least, by 2050, white people will be a minority. And I think with the big immigration waves in America in the late 1800s, early 1900s, people were kind of like, the white people in charge were like, whoa, too many of these people are coming in. What does this mean for us? There was anxiety about this. What does it mean when we lose control of our customs and traditions, and now we're celebrating these other holidays, eventually, and it's like, are they going to replace Christmas and Easter? You're like, no, and I think we're wrestling with that. What does it mean that, Australian Adventist membership and North American Adventist membership is like nothing, like less than 10% of world church membership, but we have all these institutions and papers and things like that. So like, what is that going to mean for us? And so I think there's some anxiety there that began building up in the early 1900s, and it still persists, right? We don't identify it as such. We find other ways of explaining it. But it's there.
It's really interesting how some of the stuff that you've covered, the issues from way back then, can speak into this context. And I think you do that slightly intentionally, like knowing some of the things, not always, because I listened back to stuff, to catch up, and it was like, oh, this actually is speaking to what's happening this week, sort of in world events. So some of it does it unintentionally, I think, but also, the color lines and the racial issues in the church. Some of those things, obviously race has been all over the papers at the moment, and the papers, how old do I sound? The internet, the news, the radio, whatever, everywhere. But yeah,
like a carrier pigeon let me know that there was a war going on somewhere. I got a telegram.
But it's very relevant to today is, I guess, the
Yeah.
point that I'm
Yep.
trying to make.
Yep. And I wasn't intentional about that. You're right in the beginning, because I am scared of the Adventist beehive. And, you know, if you try to make too many applications, you know,
Yeah.
they come for you.
Yeah.
Political points.
Yeah. Now I don't care. All right.
Yeah.
And on that note,
Be like the thumbnail of this video. Now
That's
he
the-
doesn't care.
now he doesn't care.
I'll have a picture.
No,
Oh.
we really,
Broken.
sorry, Mary Ellen.
Sorry, you go.
We appreciate you being here, Matthew. And can you just give us a plug? How can we encounter you? We can watch your stuff, look at YouTube, some of the projects you're working on in the future, and where your podcasts are at, so that people can engage with you if they're interested in the stuff that we've talked about today, finding out more.
Yeah. So if you want to listen, you can find it in pretty much any podcasting app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, Android Podcasts, Stitcher, all those sort of things. You can listen to it. You can also find, I put some of the first season, I put the videos up on YouTube for Adventist History Podcast. You can just search for that. Our church's YouTube is Peoria Adventists, which is when I'm on most of the time these days. And if you have any angry mail, I want you to send them to the Record. And,
Jared can deal with that.
yeah, I can't do
that'll
that
be
to
fun.
Jared, because your daughter's name is the same as my daughter's name, and we are blood brothers for the rest of our lives now.
There it is.
Done. It is done.
Love it. Well,
Um,
yeah, I guess that's a wrap. But Matthew, again, thank you for joining us. I think this was a great promo for your podcast. I'm going to be listening to everything from the beginning. Jared couldn't quite listen to all of them, but I think you did. So
Yes,
do it.
I did it. I got the one lost sheep.
I give up.
I needed fun.
Yeah, that's how it always is, man.
But yeah, all the best with your future podcasts and your ministry. It seems like you're really making waves, and we love that record. So yeah, blessings to you, and yeah, we'll catch you around, I guess.
Right. Thank you guys so much for having me. This has been the highlight of my day, and happy October 22nd to you people who are watching. And if it's not October 22nd when you're watching, you have to pause this video and wait until next year and then watch it only on October 22nd. Okay.
The gift that keeps on giving.
I can live with that, because we're at the end of the video. So yeah, do that.
Watch
Watch it again.
All right. Have a good night, Matthew. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. See you later.
See ya.